we're going to be tracking election fraud, which comes out every election, both off-year elections and big presidential elections. And we've made a lot of headway. A lot of people have gone to jail. Fraud's been certified in multiple states. Diebold executives have gone public. Others have gone public admitting fraud in the black boxes that they say are proprietary with the system, whoever controls them, depending on, in the case of Senator Hagel in Nebraska, 90+% of the votes for him cast on machines he owned, or whether it's Hart Intercivics, predominantly controlled by the Romney family, and one of Romney's sons controlling a large portion of the votes, or Democratic-connected groups controlling large swaths of the country that use different machines. It is really unprecedented that this is right in our face. What Stalin said, I don't care who votes, I care who counts the ballots, to paraphrase his famous quote. So we stand here at the threshold, and I remember 10, 12 years ago interviewing Bev Harris, and I remember interviewing the Collier brothers before they died. I remember interviewing their daughter. I remember interviewing all the different election fraud specialists, but Bev Harris is preeminent amongst them because of her tireless work and her history as a corporate fraud investigator. That now most people, I've seen national polls, 80 to 90+%, depending on which one, say they know there's problems with voting in this country. My issue is the UN is so corrupt with what they do, overthrowing countries and things, that I don't think you can have Satan come judge Beelzebub or Lucifer, and the pot can't expose the kettle here, basically, out of the frying pan into the fire. But the UN is running around as well. People out in California are being fired from the elections if they complain about it. In several states like Texas, they're saying they're going to arrest UN monitors. I think it's fine as long as they're not in the polling place itself. But see, they're not going after the machines. They're going after people not being able to vote repeatedly. So it's that classic socialist mode. But Bev Harris is an American writer, activist, and founder of Black Box Voting, Inc., national, nonpartisan, nonprofit educational watchdog group. She helped to popularize the term black box voting while authoring the book of the same title. In 2003, she discovered the source code for voting manufacturer Diebold Election Systems, which now operates under the name Premier Election Systems, and she proved it was designed to go in and flip it and then cover it up. Oh, yeah, it's really nice. After examining these files, Harris wrote an article in July of 2003, detailing how to bypass passwords and manipulate election results on the Diebold Jim's central tally system. And, of course, they made a blockbuster film that aired on HBO, Hacking Democracy, with her. And Harris also filed a whistleblower lawsuit alleging that Diebold Election Systems had made false claims when selling their system to Alameda County, California. Diebold paid the state of California $2.6 million to settle the case. Blackboxvoting.org is her site. Bev, we're going to keep you about 10, 15 minutes. I know you're a busy lady. You're going to pop in tomorrow and then longer on Wednesday, and then maybe even Thursday once we learn of what's happened. It's not a question of will there be fraud. The only question is how much of it will we discover. Bev Harris, what are you seeing since we talked last week developing?
Well, one thing I'm seeing is a really big effort to focus people's attention away from the insiders. We're starting to see, some guy came out and claimed on the internet that he had voted 4 times in North Carolina. Understand what that is. That is an attempt to focus your eyes away from the insiders and instead put them on outsiders. The problem isn't outsiders coming in to commit fraud. The problem is happening on the inside. And, you mentioned we've made a lot of progress with public awareness. We really have. And I think now they know that the public knows there's something wrong. So they're going, well, what do we do next? Well, let's focus their attention on the outside game. No, we have to pay attention to where it's happening, and that's the people with inside access.
And I guess they call that comptroller style fraud. That's always the biggest threat, just like we saw John Corzine ordering billions of dollars to disappear. Right.
I mean, if you look at bank robbery, although it's always in the papers about, a guy with a mask who comes in with a gun to rob the bank, most theft from banks happens from the inside, from their own accounting staff. Inside fraud outnumbers outside fraud probably in elections, 100, 1,000 to 1.
Sure. So you're saying retail fraud is always the distraction when it's the centralized fraud, and the fact that the integrity of the system is a proven scam, that's the big kahuna.
Right. And we have to get still a little bit better at detecting, at getting our BS meter to perform better, because the idea that we're watching, if you're seeing it all over national TV, somebody is allowing it to get to national TV.
That's right. They fight tooth and nail to suppress for decades the electronic voting machine fraud that you and others have forced out in the open, but they never want to cover that.
And just a quick correction, I guess, although it's actually a difference without a difference. The Romney family itself doesn't have controlling interest in Hart InterCivic. When I say difference without a difference, though, what it is a Bain Capital spinoff that has controlling interest. And so, you go through a couple of hoops before you find any Romneys there. And so there, immediately, as soon as the story came out, NPR says, oh, nothing to see here, the Romneys aren't involved, deflecting our attention from the fact that this is a Bain spinoff. Who is associated with Bain? Romney. And so we start seeing, and what's amazing is we see these outlets like NPR saying not only is Romney himself not involved, but not to worry, even if he was, there's no problem.
Wow.
Who do they have? Who do they bring on to tell us that that's the truth? An election official who says, of course, nobody could tamper with my machines. It's just such silliness.
Yeah, you have the Democrats and the Republicans defending a proven fraudulent system. And again, I've got a couple of subsidiary companies, but they're still under my control. And to sit there and say, oh, well, it's a subsidiary, so it's not a conflict of interest. That's kind of like Romney saying, I have these blind trust, and they're not really blind trust because they're still in there manipulating them.
Right. So, I think we're getting closer, though, Alex, to getting the public to the tipping point. And so now we're seeing these games of diversion, but they're really, even those aren't really working all that well. And, I've told some people, look, if Romney does win, which looks very probable to me, but if he does win, then he better do poorly on the Hart machines, because no amount of denial is going to take people's attention off those Hart machines.
You're right. Let's talk about that, because, I see it kind of like one is cyanide, one is arsenic. Both of them are poisonous. Both of them are lethal doses. They work for the same globalist. But there are going to be some differences. I don't like the fact that Obama openly says he's going to go after handguns and rifles. You've got Romney saying he wants to, expand big wars. I don't like that. It's kind of like pick your poison. But I do see Michael Moore calling for violence if Obama is not elected, saying that, well, if he's not elected, it's fraud. I see Bill Maher stirring up divide and conquer, really saying some horrible things. What do you think's going on behind that? Because you and I that are old school hands of the world studying this, they wouldn't let them, go out and put this out in the media if they weren't being given some type of okay from up top. So, what do you think the strategies are on both sides from these groups? And I really respect your view. Why do you think it's going to be Romney when the mainstream media is saying it's going to be Obama?
Well, what I watch, why I think it's going to be Romney, and by the way, that doesn't have anything to do with who really voted for who. That just has to do with who the chosen winner will be. What I watch right before the election is when they send out things all over the mainstream media to create plausibility, and especially when they send out implausible things to create plausibility. Let me give you an example. In 2008 in New Hampshire in the primary, we saw this happen with Hillary Clinton. Now, she had just lost the Iowa caucus, and she came out and they said, well, Hillary was 18 points behind, but she's caught up now because she cried. And that made all the women decide to vote for Hillary. That's what I call implausibly trying to develop a veneer of plausibility. Well, I've been seeing a lot of that in terms of the Romney thing, where they're trotting out polls that are from these companies that use a known bias in their sampling method, and they're ignoring some of the other polls. And if they're working so hard to create plausibility, then it makes me think that they need that plausibility for some reason, i.e. they plan to create a result that they need plausibility.
Sure, Bev, I agree with you to a point, but we see both sides doing this. Having the bookies come out in Europe and the U.S. and say, 70+% chance that it's going to be Obama, or all the polls that were showing Romney winning by 3 to 5 points suddenly show it neck and neck or Obama winning.
Now, see, I've missed that. I've been watching the other flip, so who knows now? Yeah, well, then maybe not, I'm
who knows? We're going to find out tomorrow.
At predicting winners, by the way, I should tell you that.
Well, Bev, let me just add this. When it's all a smokescreen and fraud with both sides, who could know? I mean, it's gotten so corrupt, maybe they don't even know. It's whoever can snatch the most, control the most machines.
Well, yeah, regardless of who wins, there's absolutely no reason to have confidence in it. And there's also no reason to commit violence, because guess what? That's not going to get us any farther, any more than, you see a bunch of people marching around in the street with signs nowadays. That doesn't work. That worked in the 60s. It doesn't work now. We're really looking at this point, we need to expose the fraud, and we need to do litigation and hope that we get a good judge. You remember with the tobacco litigation, they eventually won after losing a lot of battles because they just kept throwing it against the wall until they got a judge that found their way.
Well, that's like George Washington lost almost every battle but never gave up, so they finally won. I mean, it's whoever wants it the most.
Yeah, exactly. And we see this when we see them, pushing in, for example, internet voting, which is like the worst of all worlds. And every time it gets defeated by citizens coming up to the legislator and testifying against it, it comes right back the next year with its corporate sponsors. Well, we got to do the same thing. If we want public sovereignty, if we want public control of our own government, we can't just give up after losing one fight. This is not something, and I tell people, we've got to get off the treadmill. It's not something just about one election. It's about restoring our freedom.
That's right. We get 60% turnouts on average for these big presidential elections, or close to it. And you get, 8.5 or so. What's the average? Last time I checked, 8.6. Local turnout. We need people to take over their local towns and cities. We need people to take over the states. That's where the rubber meets the road, not just every 4 years wake up for a few months and then go back to sleep.
And the same thing goes with, if you're going to litigate about election, getting them back in the open, pick a small issue-oriented thing that happens locally, because there's not going to be as much dollars behind defending that. And all you have to do is win the principle. It doesn't matter which race you win the principle with.
Now, I know in the past, one of the final questions we've gotten, we'll get a bigger update from you on Election Day and then on Wednesday in the aftermath. Obviously, that's what's going to be really important, is what happens in the aftermath with Bev Harris of blackboxvoting.org. Now, I've studied this quite a bit, but break it down as simply as you could in a few minutes, like you were talking to, say, a CNN audience. How does the election work when you see them come out and act like they've all gotten the numbers first? I know it was voter news services in the past, because it's not just regional fraud. I know we've seen chicanery up at the national level when they integrate that. What's the company called now?
It's called NEP, National Election Pool. It's the same guys as the Voter News Service. They just changed their name. And essentially, when you're watching CNN and you're channel surfing from channel to channel, and they're all pretending that they have their own analysts, and they're going to tell you, it's not. They don't have different analysts. They're all using NEP. They all pay NEP. They have one set of analysts, and they all repeat the same numbers and pretend that they're having a horse race for who can get the results first. And what's so interesting is NEP this year has decided it's not going to exit poll 19 states. So I tell you, I really am. I'm going to watch TV tomorrow night with a stopwatch and see how quickly they call the states where they happen to have canceled the exit poll.
Unbelievable. What's your intel on what CBS News and others are reporting that the New York Board of Elections is saying they may allow voting past Tuesday? What in the world is that going to do?
Not just that, they also said people can fax in their vote, they can email it in, and they're blaming it on the storm. But here's what I don't understand. In the Help America Vote Act, one of the things that they required was a disaster plan, because of course it can happen. If you're going to depend on electronics and the electricity goes out, you need to have a backup plan. They have backup plans. So I also am a little confused by that too, though, because